Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rule of Saints, Episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about Sacra Parentela, or Holy Kinship, and the beloved family of Jesus. I like to say that this is the officially Catholic approved version of the Da Vinci Code, obviously without the heresies. But we're going to cover the biblical tradition, the Catholic Church tradition, as well as some other traditions about Jesus's family that a lot of people are not aware of. And we're going to try to put all of these together, and I'm going to tell you how this relates to the beloved family of Lazarus, as well as the beloved disciple. So let's begin with the first slide. First, let's get heresies and critical scholarship errors out of the way. So before I even discuss anything, I want people to know what critical scholars have been saying in recent years that are similar to some of the Gnostic heresies that we've heard. And this also drew inspiration for the famous movie and book, The Da Vinci Code. Um, so before I begin, uh, the proto-Gnostic text, the Gospel of Thomas, saying 1:14, attempted to turn Mary Magdalene into a man. This was clearly done because the beloved disciple is a man, but Mary Magdalene of Bethany, if they are the same person, is in the beloved family of Lazarus. So in the Gospel of John, the beloved family of Lazarus is Lazarus, Mary of Bethany, and Martha. And Catholic Church tradition teaches that Mary Magdalene and Mary of Bethany are the same person. I'm also in agreement with that particular position. I know there are some Catholics who have tried to distinguish between two different Marys. The church doesn't have an official position on this, but the majority of church doctors, saints, and church fathers all say that Mary Magdalene, Mary of Bethany are the same person. And by the time I'm done with this slide, you'll see why they are the same person. But the proto-Gnostic Gospel of Thomas uh, wanted to make Mary Magdalene beloved based upon that description from the family of Lazarus and John. Other Gnostic texts continued this claim of Mary Magdalene being the beloved disciple, so it's not just the Gospel of Thomas. You have multiple heretical Gnostic texts that claim this. The reason the Gnostics committed this error is the same reason why many critical scholars debate the identity of the beloved disciple. So, in recent years, critical scholars have actually begun to claim that the Bible is edited, and they've actually attempted to identify the beloved disciple not as John the Apostle, but either as Lazarus or as Mary Magdalene, which I'll show here in a second. The key biblical passages that these false rumors build upon are passages related to the family of Lazarus in the Gospel of John 11:1 through 3, 11:5, and 11:35 through 36. In John 11:5, he names the beloved family of Lazarus, Mary of Bethany, and Martha. Modern critical scholars that hold that Lazarus as the beloved disciple include Ben Witherington, Richard Buckham, James Charlesworth, Robert Kaiser, Urban Wald. They all claim the beloved disciple is either possibly Lazarus, or some of them, such as James Charlesworth, are very positive that they believe that the beloved disciple is Lazarus. And I'm going to disprove that during this slideshow, so don't worry, I'm not claiming these things. Modern critical scholars Ramon Jacino, Esther de Boer, Elizabeth Johnson say the beloved disciple is possibly Mary of Bethany or Mary Magdalene if they are the same figure. Modern critical scholars mentioning the only modern critical scholar mentioning Martha as possibly she doesn't really say that Martha is the beloved disciple, but she claims that Martha doesn't exist. So Elizabeth Schrader Pulitzer claims Martha never existed in early manuscripts and that Mary was the only woman mentioned in the beloved family. This comes from very weak evidence based upon a single manuscript that she found. She leaned towards Mary Magdalene, but hasn't made this official. She just kind of speculated that Mary Magdalene could be the beloved based upon this error that was found in a new manuscript that we found. But the problem with this, the reason why this evidence is weak is because you could have just had a manuscript writer who accidentally wrote down the wrong name first, and then they, for whatever reason, decided to scrap that manuscript, and then we only found a portion of it. So there's really no evidence that uh, Martha did not exist. This is just speculation based upon a very small fragment. But now I'm about to conclusively prove all of these scholars and Gnostic heretics wrong within this slideshow. Uh, Evidence of John the Apostle as beloved. Before I discuss this evidence, in my previous video, I mentioned I have a bachelor degree in religious studies, and I actually studied critical scholarship in college. So prior to my conversion to Catholicism, I was actually open to the possibility of editing of the beloved disciple and this relationship between the beloved family and the beloved disciple. So that's the reason why I'm familiar with a lot of these critical scholars, is because I studied them in college. And previously, I was a non-denominational Christian. I visited multiple Christian denominations prior to my conversion to Catholicism. But this evidence I'm about to show right here, I can explain why I believe this conclusively proves that John the Apostle is the beloved disciple. The earliest reference comes from Irenaeus in 180 AD, referring to Polycarp, who was a disciple and student of John himself. Polycarp was also not only instructed by apostles and conversed with many who had seen Christ, but was also appointed bishop of the church in Smyrna by apostles in Asia, whom we also saw in our early youth. He, Polycarp, always taught the things which he had learned from the apostles. John, the disciple of the Lord, who also leaned upon his breast himself, published a gospel while living at Ephesus in Asia. This comes from Against Heresies 3 by Irenaeus. And the important thing for people to know about Polycarp is that he's not just some side figure within the church. Polycarp was probably one of the most famous church fathers during his time period directly after the apostles. So everybody in the church knew who Polycarp was. He was famous. He was uh, he was probably uh, the most famous person within the church, more famous than even some of the other bishops appointed by the apostles. Irenaeus also said, I can describe the very place where the blessed Polycarp sat and taught, how he would speak his familiar intercourse with John, and how the rest who had seen the Lord, John, and with the rest who had seen the Lord. This comes from the letter of Florinus preserved by Eusebius. The earliest manuscripts of Against Heresies are dated 180 to 200 AD, and although Book 3 did not survive in our earliest manuscripts, there are no major scholarly movements or critical scholars disputing it due to widespread Latin references and quotations. So all of the quotations say that Book 3 is there. We just unfortunately didn't get Book 3 to survive in the earliest manuscripts. But the importance of this, and this is, I'm going to use an analogy for how this proves that John the Apostle is the beloved disciple. So right now we're living in the year 2026. Imagine if I told you that Martin Luther King Jr. was a white man named Bob. Well, everybody in the year 2026, they would look at me like I'm crazy. Like, that's stupid. Or that's a stupid. Why would you say that Martin Luther King Jr. is a white man named Bob? Well, that's the exact same thing that these critical scholars who are trying to claim that the beloved disciple has a different identity, uh, it's the exact same thing they're claiming about Polycarp. So Polycarp, 180 AD, this is only like 80 years um, after when the apostles were still alive. This is very, very early. So, in the same relationship, living here in the year 2026, if I were to start saying ridiculous claims about famous figures that everybody knows who this figure is, it's going to be very easily uh, disprovable by people who are living only 60 or 80 years after that particular famous individual. So it would be a huge scandal and a huge lie if you're going to call Polycarp a liar only 60 to 80 years after uh, his death, or actually it's even less after his death. But this evidence is widespread throughout the church, so all of the church knew who Polycarp was. All of the church knows that Polycarp was taught by John, and they are all aware that John the Apostle is the beloved disciple. All of these other speculations about Mary Magdalene or Lazarus or the beloved family of Bethany, these are all speculations based upon very weak evidence. So, let's look at evidence of John the Apostle in the Bible. Uh, Eusebius and St. Jerome also repeat the testimony of Irenaeus that Polycarp was taught by John the Apostle, who is the beloved disciple. Uh, do you know who Aunt Salome or Aunt Mary is within the New Testament? Most of you probably don't. Some of you, if you're a scholar or if you just study the Bible like you're supposed to, you may have heard, especially of Aunt Mary of Clopas, but it's in the Bible. Most people don't know who Jesus's aunts are, though. Uh, they're both sisters of Mother Mary, and you'd think if you love Jesus, you'd get to know his family. But unfortunately, a lot of people, when they read the Bible, they are looking for their own personal spiritual fulfillment. So they don't really pay attention to some of the smaller details, such as Mother Mary having sisters. John 19:25 says, "Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary, wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene." The Greek in John 19:25 can be punctuated in two ways. It could either be four women standing by the cross, or it could be three women standing by the cross. The question is his mother's sister referring to Mary, wife of Clopas, or is his mother's sister a separate woman? In Matthew 27:56, we get a little bit of evidence that there could be four women. It says that Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee were amongst the women. Mark 15:40 says that Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Less and Joseph, and Salome were amongst the women. So we see in both Matthew and Mark, Salome is amongst the women. And what I'm getting ready to show you is this tradition of his mother's sister actually is attributed to Salome. It's not attributed to Mary, wife of Clopas. It could be, and there are Catholics who have interpreted it both ways. But in this particular holy kinship tradition, his mother's sister is going to be attributed to Salome. There does raise a question of why doesn't it say Mary, wife of Clopas, is also his mother's sister? Why does it distinguish one woman as his mother's sister rather than the other? That's debatable, and that's part of what causes the confusion or the differing opinions in this particular tradition. The saying in Mark 15:40, if interpreted as four women and combined with Mark 15:40, means that Salome is the mother of the sons of Zebedee and the sister of Mother Mary. This means that she was a descendant of Saint Anne, Jesus' grandmother. This means that the sons of Zebedee, James and John, the beloved disciple, are Jesus' cousins. So we're already beginning to see a possible explanation of why does this term beloved get used in the New Testament in the first place. We don't have any other Jewish text that use the term beloved as references either for family members or for friends of family members. This is something that is unique to the Christian Gospels. I even tried to reach out to some experts in Aramaic and tried to see, hey, do you guys ever use the term beloved for family members? Do you know why you think that the Gospels would use this term beloved? And I wasn't able to get any responses from other people, but based upon my research, And based upon what I'm getting ready to show you in these subsequent slides, I'll show you why I believe this term beloved is being used for Jesus's direct family members. Biblical evidence of John as beloved continued. As I've demonstrated, John the Apostle may be a family member of Jesus through the lineage of St. Anne according to the Bible. Now, let's address Jesus' other aunt, Mary of Clopas. Mary of Clopas is the mother of James the Less and Joseph. This is consistent with Matthew 13:55, which says the brothers of the Lord are James and Joseph, or Joseph, Simon, and Judas. The word brothers is adelphos, which can also mean cousins, uncles, close family members. This is how the word is used in the Septuagint. So in the Septuagint, the word adelphos is not used for simply brothers. It's used for uncles, it's used for cousins, it's used for multiple family members. This is bad news for Protestants who claim that Jesus had literal brothers, because Mary of Clopas is not the same person as Mother Mary. Amongst the apostles were multiple blood-related family members of Jesus from Aunt Salome and Aunt Mary, or born from Aunt Salome and Aunt Mary. The Catholic Church traditionally teaches that including Saint Jerome, that James the Less is the same person as James the son of Alphaeus and James the son of Mary of Clopas. So those who try to claim that Mother Mary had multiple children, as we know many Protestants attempt to claim, they've just completely ignored what the Bible says. They've completely ignored the New Testament that says that these brothers are the children of Mary of Clopas. And Mary of Clopas is not Mother Mary. So therefore, this term adelphos does not mean brothers. It's being used in the case of cousins because Mary of Clopas is the sister of Mother Mary. So what does the beloved disciple as cousin of Jesus have to do with the beloved family of Lazarus? Well, Mary of Bethany is in the beloved family of Lazarus. Mary of Bethany is also Mary Magdalene. Then in John 12:3, Mary of Bethany anoints Jesus' feet. This is a continuation of John 11:1, which introduces Mary of Bethany. And this is why Pope Gregory I insisted that Mary Magdalene, Mary of Bethany, and the unnamed sinful woman from Luke 7 were all the same person. So I actually agree with Pope Gregory I based upon my research. There's a lot of evidence that shows that these are all the same people, and we'll continue to look at more evidence as these slides continue. This means at the foot of the cross of Jesus was his mother, his Aunt Salome, his Aunt Mary of Clopas, his cousin John, and Mary of Bethany, Mary Magdalene, who is also of the beloved family of Lazarus, so that would make her also his cousin. The term beloved is not a commonly used word for family members in other ancient Jewish texts, but as I've demonstrated here, this is what appears to be happening in the Bible. I'm only getting started though, and I haven't even started with Catholic tradition yet. The beloved disciple's commandment. So let's say you were taking care of your own mother. Then let's say you were about to pass away. Like you knew that you were about to die. Who would you assign to take care of your mother? Everybody I've ever asked this question to says a family member. Unless you have no family, you might have a friend of the family take care of your mother. But if you have a family, anybody you ask this question to, they're going to say, oh, it's your family member. It's going to take care of them. In John 19:26 and 27, when Jesus therefore had seen his mother and the disciple standing whom he loved, he said to his mother, Woman, behold thy son. After that he said to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own. The phrase, Behold thy mother, does not mean to look upon her. It means to take care of her, which the Bible emphasizes in the last sentence. According to the early Catholic tradition, John is the only apostle who did not die from martyrdom. All of the others drank from the cup that Jesus drank from, which is the Holy Grail, which is also martyrdom. I'll do a whole nother video on the Holy Grail, but just remember that the Holy Grail is actually martyrdom. That's what the real Holy Grail is. When Jesus says, "Can you drink from the cup that I drank from?" That's what he's referring to. And when all the Grail Knights failed their mission to to acquire the Holy Grail, the reason why they failed is because they ran away from danger, or they made one mistake or another in which they failed to martyr themselves. Uh, so John, on the other hand, compared to all of the other apostles, uh, he had to take care of Jesus's mother. So because he was Jesus's cousin through Aunt Salome, he was the only disciple who did not die of martyrdom. Peter didn't understand why Jesus was saying, "Feed my sheep" in John 21. Peter also refused to understand the difference between agape and philia, two different forms of love. Uh, if some of you aren't familiar with these terms, agape and philia, the reason why is because the English translation did not differentiate between the two Greek words. It translated both of them as love within the English translations of the Bible. My personal translation would have been Jesus saying, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter responding, "I love you as a best friend." Or I would even possibly say, like, "I like you," but Peter's definitely responding, "I love you," but he's responding with a form of love which is lesser than agape. So Jesus is saying, "Do you agape me?" And Peter is responding, "I philia you." And then that's why Jesus has to repeat himself 3 times. But it's hard to translate that agape means you're going to be martyred, uh, and not simply love between normal best friends. So Jesus is basically telling Peter, "You're going to be martyred. That's why I'm asking you, do you love me?" Because there's no greater love than to be martyred. So there's no greater love than for a man to give his life in martyrdom. So Peter kept saying philia, but Jesus kept saying agape. Peter was destined for the Holy Grail, along with all the other apostles. John, being the youngest and also possibly blood family to Jesus, was commanded, "Remain till I come." This means wait for me in Jerusalem. And that's exactly what Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and John did until they went to Ephesus. And if you believe the traditions, eventually France, excluding Mother Mary, of course, and excluding John, of course. The reason that rumors went around that the beloved disciple wouldn't die was because he was given a different commandment to take care of Mother Mary and wait for Jesus' return, and he was not to be martyred like Peter and all the others. So one interesting thing about the rumors that he wouldn't die is there's actually traditions that the grave of John the Apostle in Ephesus, that the ground breathes. The ground actually moves, and there's actually some traditions that he's still alive. But I'm not 100% in agreement with these traditions. It could be a miracle. It could be a miracle attributed to John the Apostle. However, uh, what Jesus is saying here is that, "Peter, you're going to be martyred." And then he's looking at his cousin and he's saying, "You're going to take care of my mother. That was the commandment that I gave you at the cross." So I think that's the important distinction that you need to draw from John 21, is that Jesus is giving his family member a different commandment than all of the other uh, 11 apostles. So, references to the beloved in the Old Testament. The origins of the use of the term beloved in reference to family members obviously comes from Jesus himself. Uh, this is not common in other Jewish texts, but the Song of Solomon has a long history of being interpreted prophetically even prior to Jesus' first coming. So even prior to the arrival of Jesus, Jews would interpret the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs prophetically. The term beloved in Hebrew is dear one, and it's used 31 times in the Song of Solomon. This is probably another best explanation of, okay, why is Jesus using this term beloved for his family members, whereas no other Jewish text that we have uses this term? Well, we have this tradition in the Song of Songs where the term beloved is used 31 times. and it's interpreted prophetically about Jesus within Catholicism. So it's not only possible but probable that Jesus's references to the love of his family and the love of his martyrs, agape and philia, and wait for me in Jerusalem, are all prophetically being spoken of in the Song of Solomon as well. The Song of Solomon 8:5, where his love, examples of this are Song of Solomon 8:5, where his love is leaning upon her beloved. Other references of searching in the garden, tending to the fields, awaiting the beloved's return, etc. Catholic mystics, especially Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, read the book of the Song of Solomon prophetically. It's important to remember that the authors of the Gospels felt that Jesus' family was important enough that they included his lineage from the line of David, the branch. I apologize, I misspelled David there. I said the line of Dave, but the line of David, or the branch, in the New Testament. It is highly likely that the Song of Solomon is referencing the branch, and it was definitely prophetically being interpreted that way by Jews. This is just my speculation, but all of the apostles knew that Jesus came from the blood of David, and this might explain the abnormal use of the word beloved in the New Testament. Even if this isn't the case, the Song of Solomon is prophetic and Jesus is fulfilling the prophecies from it. The other possibility is that Jesus is unique in referring to his family members as beloved, and this is just part of his teachings on divine love. So, the Catholic Church doesn't have an official teaching. You could interpret the beloved just being a type of divine love that Jesus gives to his family. But I do think there's quite a bit of church tradition where this term beloved is coming from the prophecies of the Song of Solomon. So now we're going to dive into the genealogical Catholic Church tradition. Now that I've shown you the historical context of the beloved family, the Catholic Church tradition of Sacra Parentela, or Holy Kinship, will begin to make more sense. Part of the reason that Protestants and many Catholics skip over traditions about the family of Jesus is because they never realized that the individuals they were reading about in the Bible were related to Jesus. Hegesippus, preserved by Eusebius of Caesarea in 160 AD, says that Clopas was the brother of Joseph, and Simeon, son of Clopas, therefore cousin of Jesus, but not by blood. Proto-Evangelium of James tells the story of Joachim and Anne, Mother Mary's parents, in 150 AD. So even in 150 AD, this is very, very early in the church's tradition, we get the story of Joachim and Anne and Mother Mary's parents. The Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew, 7th century, expands upon Proto-Evangelium, saying that Mary of Clopas is the same as Clopas, it's just a different spelling. But Mary of Clopas was another daughter of Anne, and her father's name was Cleophas. So Mary of Clopas in this tradition becomes not Mary who is married to Clopas, it's Mary who is the daughter of Clopas. So we have Mary of Cleophas. This tradition makes Mary of Clopas, meaning Mary the daughter of Clopas, and this begins the tradition that Anne had multiple husbands. So what I'm getting ready to show you is the three Mary tradition of Sacra Parentela, but this is originating very early on. So this is the 7th century, or actually in the year 150 AD, we're getting the first references. By the 7th century, we're actually getting the genealogical lines to be put together. And then eventually we get the Trinubium Annae, or the three marriages of Anne. By the 9th century Hamo tradition, it becomes a little bit confusing. There's multiple texts that say different things. It says that St. Anne was married to three men, Joachim, Cleophas, Clopas, and Salome, father of Mary Salome. It says that Anne first married Joachim and bore Mary, and then married Cleophas and bore Mary Cleophas after Joachim's death, and then married Salome after Cleophas' death and bore Mary Salome. Now, you might notice something confusing right off the bat. Salome is a woman, right? I just got done telling you that Salome is actually possibly Jesus's aunt. So it doesn't make sense that we have a man named Salome, and some of the texts will change the E to an A, and they'll say that his name was Salama rather than Salome. But obviously, there's something wrong with this three Mary tradition. But in terms of Joachim, I mean, we have texts going back to 150 AD, and also in terms of Mary of Clopas and her father Clopas, we have texts, going back to the sixth century, seventh century. So the first two, I'll make a long story short. The first two husbands, we have a long history tradition. This third husband of named Salome or Salama, we do not have early church tradition for, and this does become a conflict in church history. So this created the Salamite controversy, claiming that Salome was a man. In 1170 AD, Maurice of Kirkham wrote Contra Salamitis, or Against the Salamites, attacking this genealogy. Herbert of Bosham also rejected it. Salome is clearly a female in the New Testament, and she's the aunt of Jesus, not a man. St. Thomas Aquinas himself weighed in on this. In the 13th century, he rejects Salome as a man, but says that Anne first married Joachim and then married Cleophas when Joachim died. So St. Thomas Aquinas basically accepts the first two husbands of St. Anne, but he does not accept the third. And I'm in agreement with Thomas Aquinas on this. All the evidence points that Salome is an aunt, and this three Mary, there's no such person as Mary Salome. This was an invented person in an attempt to claim that Salome was a man for some reason. In 1260 AD, Jacobus de Varenne, which I'm sure I slaughtered his name, or Voragine, writes the Golden Legend, and this made the three Mary tradition widely known and accepted. The Golden Legend says that Joachim, Cleophas, and Salome were their fathers. Joseph, Alphaeus, and Zebedee married them, and from them came Christ, James the Less, Joseph, Simon, Jude, James the Greater, and John. So by the time you get the Golden Legend, you still get the falsely attributed Salome, but all of the other people I just showed you in the New Testament that are related to Jesus, they're all also mentioned in this holy lineage. So by the 14th, 15th century expansions, Hismira or Esmira is Anne's sister, and she became the mother or ancestor of Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother. So now we're adding even more people to the family, where we're now claiming that John the Baptist even is part of this holy kinship. And the holy kinship tradition exploded in artwork around the 15th century. So by the 15th century, if you go and you study a lot of the paintings of the Holy Family, they will include John the Baptist. They will include Elizabeth. They will include these five cousins who were apostles. It should completely change the way you view the apostles. If you have five of the apostles who are cousins of Jesus, that's a pretty large number. That's like almost half of them are blood related to Jesus. And in the artwork in the 15th century, you do actually see this. French biblical scholar Jacques Lefebvre Dietaples also attacks the Trinubium in 1570 AD. So there's just one additional person who attacked the Salamite tradition, if you want to go look that up. So Catholic tradition continued. In 1545 AD, the Council of Trent cracked down on artwork that may contain false doctrine. Sorry, I put may not contain false doctrine. That was my typo there. And since the church did not agree about the Salamite controversy, the three Marys became less popular in artwork. So the Council of Trent didn't address this issue specifically, but what it did is it basically said, we want artwork to follow tradition better. And when it did that, because there were so many people disputing the Salamite controversy, the Holy Family started becoming less popular within artwork after the Council of Trent. So I agree with St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Anne had two husbands, Joachim and Clopas, not three. And as I showed in my first slide in the New Testament, Salome is amongst the women of the cross who are related to Jesus, and she is the mother of the sons of Zebedee, James the Greater and John the Evangelist, or Beloved. And there's no such person as Mary of Salome. It's simply Aunt Salome, if you interpret the sister of Mary to be a different woman than Mary of Clopas or Aunt Mary. Additional older tradition. This is kind of separate, but somewhat related. This is more of like a side story about the family of Jesus, specifically through Jude. So there's this term called the Desposini, and there's the Desposini tradition. It's also worth mentioning, though it's not directly related. The Desposini were the blood relatives of Jesus, Adelphos, with documentation dating back to the 2nd century AD. So this is a very, very early tradition about the blood family members of Jesus. Julius Africanus spoke of the Desposini, and this is recorded by Eusebius in 220 AD. The word means those belonging to the Lord. So it actually means of the Lord, but it's those belonging to the Lord. Julius Africanus says that they were called Desposini on account of their connection with the family of the Savior. In 160 AD, Hegesippus claimed that Simeon, son of Clopas, succeeds James the Just, brother of the Lord, or cousin of the Lord. And this is also recorded by Eusebius. He writes, "They all with one consent pronounce Simeon, the son of Clopas, worthy of the episcopal throne of that parish. He was a cousin, as they say, of the Savior. This was because Clopas was the brother of Joseph." So Eusebius also records that Hegesippus says the grandsons of Jude appeared before the emperor Domitian in 81 AD. Of the family of the Lord, there were still living the grandchildren of Jude, who is said to have been the Lord's brother according to the flesh. They were also identified as descendants of King David. Domitian was supposedly concerned about the Davidic claimants being brought before him. He asked them if they were descendants of David, and they confessed that they were. After Domitian released them, they ruled the churches because they were witnesses and were also relatives of the Lord. And that's a quote from Eusebius's text. Simeon, son of Clopas, was martyred under Trajan. In Ecclesiastical Histories 1:7, Eusebius records that Sextus Julius Africanus composed a letter to a man named Aristides, attempting to reconcile the genealogies of Jesus in Matthew and Luke. Africanus says some families maintained private genealogical records after the destruction of public genealogical records. Among them were those already mentioned called Desposini on account of their connection with the family of the Savior. So Africanus repeats the story that Herod the Great destroyed Jewish genealogical registers because his own ancestry was comparatively undistinguished, or at least according to Africanus. So what we're seeing here is a literal Da Vinci Code. I'm actually very surprised that Dan Brown didn't include this in his book, because we're talking about the genealogies of Jesus's family here, and we actually have written records of the genealogies. We know that that the Gospels themselves included the older genealogies, and what Africanus is saying here is he's saying that after the public genealogies were destroyed by Herod, that there is a private genealogy that still existed, and this private genealogy is being discussed by the Catholic Church in the 2nd century AD. So that's just a side story, but I want to go back to the bigger church tradition. But it is important to remember the ancestors of Jude. We actually have discussions of genealogies going into the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The beloved family of Lazarus, the golden legend medieval Vita of St. Martha, 1260 AD, states that Martha came from Bethany and descended from royal lineage through her father Cyrus and her mother Eucharia or Encharia. It states that Mary Magdalene and Lazarus were children of Eucharia and Cyrus, and this legend also adds Maximine with the three family members who traveled as missionaries to France. In the 15th century Vitae Saint Marie Madeleine, it says, "The Blessed Magdalene was of very noble lineage. Her father was named Cyrus and her mother Eucharia, and she was sister to Lazarus and sister to Martha." There's a South English legendary that the manuscript's 1270 AD, but most scholars think it's actually older. It's called The Life of Mary Magdalene. It says that her parents were Titus and Cyrus and Dame Eucharia. So we still get Encharia, same name, but this is in England, not in France. So this shows that the lineage was widespread across Europe, and it wasn't just in France, and it dated prior to the Golden Legend 1260. So the reason we know this is because scholars can look at the particular writing and they can determine when it was written based upon the manuscript, based upon the writing. So the South English legendary is actually the oldest, or it's the one that critical scholars have dated as the oldest. There are many legends about the beloved family in France that I'm not mentioning during this presentation, but the important takeaway from this presentation is that the lineage was recorded by Catholic tradition as being a royal lineage. In the Life of Mary Magdalene by Rabanus Maurus, he says, "Her most noble mother, named Eucharia, derived her illustrious lineage from the royal stock of the Israelite people." And he names the father as being named Theophilus, as being of royal lineage from Syria. Hence the name Cyrus, in other traditions, comes from this idea that it was Syria. Or it's possible that maybe Cyrus was not associated with Syria, and Rabanus Maurus is saying otherwise, but it appears to be a royal lineage from Syria and a royal lineage from Israel. It also says that the family possessed Magdalene, Bethany, and large parts of Jerusalem. So we know that there were amongst women who supported Jesus financially within his ministry, and here it's actually claiming that no, these were royal blood descendants who owned large portions of Jerusalem. The question then becomes, which royal family from Israel did the beloved family belong to? Could this be the house of David? We have multiple royal lineages. This particular tradition doesn't conclusively say that the family of Lazarus comes from the house of David. However, given everything I was showing you previously about the beloved in the Song of Songs and the term beloved being used for Jesus's family members, it's not far-fetched to speculate that we are talking about the house of David here. The legend doesn't tell us directly. Is the title beloved not simply an attribute of families who are close to Jesus? This makes sense as a description of the family of Jesus, given that the Song of Solomon's prophetic relationship with the house of David and the importance of all the other family members of Jesus who are recorded as apostles and women at the foot of the cross in the New Testament. So based on all the slides that I showed you previously, it's not conclusive, but it's not far-fetched that this royal lineage tradition of the beloved family of Lazarus is in fact referring to the house of David. So, conclusion of the Sacra Parentela. If the royal lineage of the beloved family recorded in Catholic tradition is of the house of David, then this means that the beloved family of Lazarus, Mary Magdalene, and Martha are also related to Jesus. This would disprove Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code and all of the Gnostic heresies as well. It makes sense that Jesus would send Mother Mary to be taken care of by one of his 5 cousins who were also apostles, and it gives an explanation on why this title beloved is used for the specific individuals in the New Testament, both for the beloved disciple John and for the beloved family of Lazarus. The Catholic Church doesn't have an official dogmatic position on what Catholics should believe on this matter. However, Catholics should take note that most of the doctors, saints, and church fathers held to the traditions of the Sacra Parentela, except with some minor variations, such as the Solemite controversy, or removing Salome as one of the husbands of Anne, and the name of the beloved and the name of the beloved family's father. So there was two different names for Mary Magdalene's father, Mary Magdalene, Lazarus, and Martha. Their father, we have two different names. So there's some discrepancies in that name. There's a discrepancy in that there aren't three Marys um, who are associate or who are sisters of Mother Mary. There's actually only uh, two women, or I'm sorry, two Marys and then one Salome, if you believe that particular New Testament tradition. And I apologize, I lost my spot. In terms of Jesus's aunts, some Catholics claim only Mary of Clopas, who is Jesus's aunt. Others say that Salome is Jesus's aunt, which I think gives a better explanation for the beloved disciple. The Sleeping John tradition is very interesting, and it could be a whole nother video in itself. The reason why John looks feminine in many of the paintings while passed out sleeping on the dinner table is because he's a young man. So he was not only the single apostle who was not martyred, as prophesied by Jesus in John 21, he was also the youngest of the apostles. So that's why he looks feminine in the paintings. It's not because it's Mary Magdalene. It's not because he's a woman. It's because he's a young man. Sometimes I like to imagine going over to somebody's house and you'll see a nephew or a niece leaning upon their uncle. This is what the image in the New Testament reminds me of. The New Testament was very explicit about the descriptions of Jesus' family, but the majority of Christians don't like to put in the difficult genealogical work, and they just skip over phrases like his mother sister in John 19. People have a tendency to see what they want to see, exactly how the opening of the Da Vinci Code described scotoma, or a type of psychological blind spot based on expectations. Modern Catholic theologians have been influenced by Protestant and atheist critical scholars, and this makes many modern scholars difficult to recommend as resources. I had to unlearn a whole bunch of the stuff that I learned in college. So I was learning from what were supposedly the top PhDs in religious studies. And the more and more I learned after college and through my Catholic conversion, the more and more I learned that a lot of what they're writing is not very good. The Catholic Church tradition is actually a lot more accurate and it makes a lot more sense. Most critical scholars will cite Eastern sources and claim Mary Magdalene's story ended in Ephesus, but that's because they have a Protestant bias or an atheist bias, and they want to dismiss the French tradition. Uh, they don't have any faith, so when they hear about miracles, they immediately dismiss them as fictional legends. Catholic historians and Catholic theologians should avoid these types of critical scholars' teachings at all cost. Or if they are discussing the dating of manuscripts with them or engaging in some type of critical debate with them, at the very least, they should be aware of their bias and intentions. They should also be aware of the traditions of the Catholic Church concerning the Sacra Parentela. So I will let all of you go back through all my slides and look up each tradition and biblical verse and make a decision for yourself. I do want to mention one additional thing before I end this show. There is this additional prophecy of a Davidic figure in the book of Ezekiel. And this is another one of these very controversial prophecies that people don't like to talk about. I almost think there's a prophetic silence on this particular subject, because even if you go look through all the church fathers and church doctors, very few people, if any, even speak of the prince within Ezekiel. But within Ezekiel, you do have a Davidic Messiah-like figure who's said to be of the blood of David, who is not Jesus because he makes sacrifices for himself. The official Catholic position on this, there are some Catholics who like to interpret things symbolically. St. Augustine was famous in interpreting everything symbolically as being like a symbol of the church. And I believe he actually does talk about the gates. So when it comes to Ezekiel's temple, there's a very sound tradition of Mother Mary being referred to as the gate within Ezekiel's temple. But this prince is clearly not Jesus. And it's possible that this could be a prophetic figure who is of the Sacra Parentela, who arrives in the future. And there are, in terms of Catholic eschatology, which I will have to make a whole nother video on this, the majority of Catholic eschatology, in terms of doctors, saints, and church fathers, is what I would call amillennial futurism. So, amillennial futurism is different than amillennial preterism. Futurism says we are interpreting this particular prophecy as an event that's going to take place in the future. Amillennial basically says, due to the Nicene Creed, we don't believe in Chiliism or Kiliism, which basically means Christ's rule on earth. The Nicene Creed says that Christ's kingdom is in heaven. It is a heresy to claim that it's here on earth. So that's Kiliism that is rejected. However, all of the other prophecies are futuristic. And what happened in the 20th century is that a lot of critical scholars were influenced by Protestants, or a lot of Catholic critical scholars, I should say, were influenced by Protestants, and they were influenced by atheists, and they began to interpret amillennialism from a preterist perspective, meaning these prophecies already happened. These were things that already happened in the past. Another reason why they did this is that St. Augustine's interpretation of Revelation is probably the most widespread. And I would describe St. Augustine's eschatology as being symbolic and present. So St. Augustine basically looks at a lot of these prophetic events and says, this is the church. This is the church. This is the church. And he says, like, it's currently happening. And there are prophecies that sometimes are both happening in the future and happening in the present. A good example of this is John the Baptist as a fulfillment of Elijah. It doesn't mean that there's not a prophecy of Elijah. It means the prophecy of Elijah was fulfilled, but it doesn't mean that Elijah was not taken up into heaven while still living. And many Catholics, including Saint Bellarmine, claim that Elijah is going to be one of the two witnesses to return in the book of Revelation. And then we also have examples of the Antichrist, where you might have a destruction of a temple which fulfills a particular prophecy, but that prophecy, even though it's already been fulfilled by the symbolic destruction of the second temple, it's still expected. So sometimes I don't know what to call these, but we can call them dual prophecies or dual meaning prophecies. So that's how I like to interpret St. Augustine's interpretation. And the reason I'm talking about eschatology here at the end of this show is because this prince in the book of Ezekiel could be interpreted in that manner. Basically, uh, there is a person who is from the blood of David, is from the line of David, but they are not Jesus. So it doesn't mean that the gates within Ezekiel's temple can't also be interpreted as Mother Mary. And I'm not going to get into that. That's a very complicated subject that will take a whole nother video. But everything we've learned about the blood of David, what I want people to get from this is that it's important to understand Jesus's family is much more important than what some Christians make them out to be. They are from the blood of David. They're from royal lineage. Prophecies circle around their family. The blood of David is not a small matter. This is the branch in which Jesus's prophecy was fulfilled. So when Ezekiel's prince, mentions the blood of David, Like, this should be something that people talk about more frequently, but for whatever reason, all of the church fathers are very, very silent about it. I wish we had more people, more of the church fathers and doctors discuss this issue, but I almost think that there could be some type of divine silence where God has silenced the world on this particular subject for some prophetic reason. But let me know what you guys think. Hit the like button, subscribe. The reason I do these long slides is that you can go back and look at my sources. Sorry, I had a couple typos on here. I was trying to do this as quickly as possible, so there's a couple typos. But let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to talking to you in the next episode.